Hey, so lately, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that I've been thinking a lot about several like unanswered or under-discussed questions in the area around neurocomplexity, authenticity, and also empathy. And in particular, with the sense of giftedness as well within these dimensions. So, having been given gifts, feeling like you have gifts, giftedness in general. And there's a lot of like interesting levels of like shame around this that I've noticed from other people, and some hesitancy about like claiming this as part of who they are. Just like really stepping into the idea of like owning these gifts. And so there's a lot of us who really sit at the middle of this area, and we're highly sensitive, both cognitively, perceptually, also emotionally, empathically. And we share many of these traits of neurocomplexity, like some of the shared traits, but we're maybe also wondering like how much this framework really serves us. Like, does it inspire us or help us grow? It definitely seems incredibly insightful as a descriptive framework. And for many people, it does the real work of social recognition and social awareness and understanding. But some of us who recognize ourselves in some of these shared traits within neurocomplexity are nevertheless feeling or not necessarily adopting this framework as like a final description of who we are, or really like anchoring our identity within this. And who are we? We are on the giftedness spectrum. This is our nature. Like, wherever we are going to question the boxes and the frameworks. Like, that's part of what it means to be gifted. And yet, so for the past month that I've been looking at this really intensely, um, now that I do understand giftedness as a dimension within neurocomplexity, um, I've been seeing all kinds of ways that gifted individuals are either disavowing this in the way that it applies to themselves, or just disavowing the concept itself. And so, if this is you, you may feel, for example, well, I don't really identify as gifted anymore. Or I was a gifted kid and then I burned out and I disappointed everyone, including myself. And I've even seen some confess online that apparently many with, or some with autism, think that giftedness is only something they have, that it's actually just a trait of giftedness. And another theory, for example, that argues that what starts as giftedness as a child or in youth can develop into what looks like ADHD or autism later on if the gifted individual doesn't actually have enough of the support or resources that they need for continuing their higher development on the level of complexity that's appropriate to them. So, what all this comes down to is that there are a lot of reasons that giftedness goes unaddressed and unclaimed in adults. And remember here, though, that we're talking about something very specific. This is much deeper and more intrinsic than merely like having impressive talent in one area, and it's also not specifically about IQ either, which has like been falsified as like a really good framework anyway. But the more that I think about it, I see giftedness as what I would might call like a specific cognitive orientation. So just as we have sexual orientations, I would argue that giftedness is a cognitive orientation that requires higher levels of integration. We deliberately seek out complexity in our synthesis, and we seek out higher levels of integration. And this is really core to me and to how I understand it based on my experience and others, like friends that I grew up with, friends that I'm in touch with, who are obviously also like, we recognize each other. And so giftedness itself has really been like misconstrued and confused, I think, in the public imagination with some of its outward signs. For example, having like a given talent can be a sign of giftedness, but that's not like what's actually at the core. That's kind of like, that's what we would call epiphenomenal. And so this really goes back to our lack of clarity collectively around the original discussion of like what's innate. What would it really mean to be like given a gift and to have this innately, um, such that you're gifted? Like we really still haven't resolved that. So things are definitely like easier if you're gifted at, say, like playing the cello or a specific type of dancing, or you are fluent in several languages. Like our society knows how to celebrate you. They know how to celebrate like these isolated traits. It fits very well within our capitalist framework. And you write 4 novels in 1 year, great. We've got a place for you. That makes sense. But some writers will talk about how like what happens when they really get in the flow and they're writing, like they kind of feel like it's not really them anymore at a certain point. Like the words maybe are just flowing through them. And basically this really is a type of trance. Um, so think about now, what if the author isn't writing anymore? What if they're recording a video, doing this while recording a video or speaking to a group? So then what are they doing? Well, this is channeling. And now this is a big shift, but this is a shift we can make from a writer just sort of letting the muse speak or getting into character in order to write a chunk of dialogue. And making this shift, there's not like a huge gap between this and, for example, someone channeling a higher dimensional entity. Now, you might say, hey, wait, one of these things isn't real. Well, you can't say that. And what this goes to show ultimately is that this whole approach here is really still just a 3-dimensional or lower dimensional standpoint on this question of giftedness. And, maybe that's really part of my point here, which is that um, the categories of neurodiversity or neurocomplexity are still like, they're still reductive and they're still lower dimensional. And so, what does this mean? This is not to negate any reality or negate any differences. This is not a denial, but in saying that it's lower dimensional, that just means that there is a level of complexity that is not being captured by these concepts. Like there's a lot still sitting on the table. And so these are useful for helping us understand and communicate with each other, but they're not yet getting at the full complexity involved in the nature of experiential phenomena, in sensation and perception itself, and for what it means to have intensities or overexcitabilities. Neuroscience obviously still has a lot of promise, but they're still taking a reductionist view on consciousness. And they're still equating consciousness with perception, which is false. It's shown to be something much larger than that. And even perception actually has already been shown to, it can occur even when the brain is offline, so to speak. Like this is very rare. We don't have a lot of documentation for this, but it's there. It's enough to falsify the fact that, you need to be in a waking state with like properly functioning eyes in order to see like what's on the other side of the room. So what I'm ultimately trying to get at here is that like the neuro in neurocomplexity or neurodiversity might have some intrinsic limitations. And yet this concept is still picking out like a range of experiential phenomena that really opens up a lot of larger questions, or it plugs into existing larger questions. And we need to start like linking some of these together in our thinking. So I guess one way that I would push this discussion, and this might feel really controversial depending on the context that you're coming from and what you've already been exposed to, but if we're really interested in like the full picture of neurocomplexity, which I think is a great framework for on the interim for like working with this, if we want the full picture here, we definitely also need to include the abilities of people who have what I would call like transpersonal perception. And so here we've got all the clairs, like clairvoyance, clairaudience, and all of this can really be understood within this broader or expanded map of what I might call cognitive orientations. And we can get into debating that, but like a very robust understanding of cognition will include the somatic and the empathic and the sensory. So let me know what you think of this, what questions this raises for you. And if you like where I'm going with this, please subscribe. Like, that's the best way you can support this channel right now. Drop a comment, let others know you're here, and then we can start talking to each other. And I'd just really love to see us like finally get closer to that first 100 mark, and then we can keep this growing as a place where we can come together and ask these kinds of questions, because I'm very prepared to like go deeper on this and like talk to specialists, talk to experts within on a specific question. And I really want to be able to like bring these people in so we can gather around and ask like what we need to know, what we want to know about, and importantly like contribute to the conversation. So hope you'll join me, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.